Well, bream are certainly a species that divide opinion. Some people absolutely love them, others absolutely hate them. But I'm definitely in the former camp, and I've spent a lot of time over the years fishing for bream, and big bream at that. So I thought today I'll take a look at some of my bream rigs and baits and how I go about using them. So if you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button below, and let's see how we get on. Now, early in the spring, I love to fish the method for bream. It's my favourite tactic, and I've caught most of my big fish on it. But we're in midsummer now, and the weed's up, and actually I'm having to fish to quite small, tight areas in the weed, and there's quite a chance of a fish snagging itself up or getting stuck in the weed. So I need to try and minimise the amount of bits and bobs on the line that are going to pick up weed when I'm playing a fish. And to be honest, I adopt a carp, sort of scale down carp tactics really. I'm using standard leg clip system, 2-ounce lead, which allows me to feel the donk as the rig goes in and gives me a bit of confidence that it's actually landed okay. I don't usually use tubing because it's just something else to catch, and as you'll see, you don't really need it. And then a quick change ring swivel, which gives a bit of flexibility and importantly allows me to change the hook length quickly. So that's the kind of rig setup. Then at the hook end, again very, very carpy, about 7 inches, 15-pound coated braid. I left most of the coating on and just peeled back a little bit, a centimetre or so at the hook end. Hook is a size 10 Nash Fang X, which is sort of a curved shank hook. Very, very effective when you've got a soft, supple section on the hook length. And size 12 boilie and a small piece of buoyant corn, just enough, just so it sits nicely on the bottom, almost like a wafter. And then at the other end of the hook length, just tied a small loop there using a figure of 8 loop knot. So one thing that I always use, and I normally tie a bag full up before it gets dark just because it makes life easier, small PVA sticks, just filled with 3mm pellets and then a piece of dissolving foam to bury the hook in. And that's why I use a hook length that I can detach easily with a loop. And I just pull that carefully through the stick. Knots tend to get a bit stuck, and then just pull the hook down into that piece of foam so it can't pick up any weed as it sinks. It's not going to get masked by any pellets or anything or damaged. It's completely protected. And next onto there goes a slightly cut down long tail rubber. And again, your stick needle comes in useful for these. That goes on as well. Like that. Make sure everything's really dry when you're doing this, otherwise your PVA will melt pretty quick and end up with quite a mess. And then that just hooks on. And there we go, onto the quick change swivel and pull the, there we go, the rubber over that to hold it all in place. So it looks quite complicated there, but it's all designed to do a job, and that's really to get to the bottom intact. I need that to get down, avoid any stray bits of weed. And there will be quite a few bits of stray weed out there. I want that to get down and sit as good as possible. Big lead also helps because I'm going to get a lot of line bites, especially when there's weed around. The bream are going to pick up the line and give you quite savage line bites. So by having a bigger lead, it's less likely to move and get dragged into the weed. So it's a good point there to don't go too small on the lead, even if you're not fishing very far out. There's one thing that's really frustrating about fishing gravel pits in summer. It's got to be weed, but in fact at times you just have to give up and move on because it can get that bad. Now ideally, especially if I'm bream fishing, I like to start early in the year. I'll get onto the water in maybe March, late March, early April, and get out and find my spots before the weed gets too bad. And I'm looking for gravel bars, hard patches, any kind of feature really that time of year. And then once you've found some nice features and you're comfortable and you know where to cast in the swims, and as the weed comes up, you've got a head start. You can map those features, mark the lines, and you know where to cast to, hopefully make the most of it before the weed gets too bad and the spots close up. Now, on a session like this one, I'm fishing, one-off really, and the first swim I went into, to be honest, it was the swim I wanted to fish because there was lots of bream there, but I couldn't actually get a nice drop on the lead and find a spot that I thought was clear enough. So it was time for plan B, move to a swim, not a million miles away, but perhaps not quite where I wanted to be. And there I was able to find one small spot, and I just put 2 rods on that and then one in the margins. And interestingly, the margin rods picked up a male fish and the others have all been female. I use a very simple marker float setup, really just designed not to pick up too much weed. Smallish float, 4-ounce lead that's quite aerodynamic shape so it doesn't pick up too much weed. A short towel to help keep the mainline braid out of the weed, and a 40-pound braided shock leader to 20-pound braided mainline so you can feel everything really well. And that's it. And it might take an hour, it might take 2 hours to find a nice spot that you're comfortable with. And you think that's a lot of disturbance, but really stick at it. You need to be absolutely 100% confident that you've found a spot that you're happy to fish on before you put any bait in or anything. And confidence is absolutely key. Make sure you're fishing on those clear areas when you're after bream, and make sure the rigs are lined just the way you want them. Now, I tend to use as little ground bait as I can get away with really when I'm bream fishing. The idea is I want to attract the fish and hold them for as long as I can without overfeeding them. And especially if you're on low stock venues, think about how many fish you're going to have in your swim at any one time. It may only be a group of half a dozen fish if you're lucky, and if you filled it in with lots and lots of bait, then the chances are they're going to eat that and the hook bait will be left alone and you won't catch anything. And the ground bait mix is generally very simple. It's just a fish meal ground bait. But bream absolutely love fish meal, but obviously they're quite expensive. So what I'll do is I'll mix them just with some cheap brown crumb, just to make it go a bit further, and it doesn't seem to affect the effectiveness of the ground bait that much. And the additive I use, again, dirt cheap. An old staple of the bream angler really is liquid molasses. I don't measure it out, just for every pint of water I use to mix up the ground bait. I'll put a good dollop of that in, and that just really sweetens it, and bream do like sweet ground baits. And I like the ground bait just to be to the point where I can squeeze it together into sort of tangerine sized balls and it holds together. 9 times out of 10 I'll use a catapult, put that out, but I might use a method blaster if I'm fishing at long range, or a spod even. If you don't compact the ground bait and just load it into a spod, it'll go out really, really well. And so what I'm trying to create is a spread of ground bait, probably about the size of your average living room really. That gives the shoal of bream room to sort of move around and not get on top of each other really, and I think that will often hold them for a little bit longer than if you go really, really tight with it. And the hook baits might be really tight on a small patch, but I don't mind a bit of the bait going into the weed, because that'll, again, the bream might struggle to get it, but they'll smell it and they'll know it's there, and it will keep them hanging around for a bit longer. Food-wise in the ground bait, I tend not to put too much in. Again, I'm fishing for bites. I want to catch the fish, I don't want to feed them. So I put some small pellets in, mainly 3 millers, probably a few 6 millers as well, but not too many. I tend not to put corn and stuff like that and boilies in, because that's a lot of food value going out. And I want just to keep the boilie and corn on the hook where it's nice and visible. So I'm just putting small pellets out, which they're just going to browse on and hopefully hold them for long enough for me to get a few bites and catch them. How much ground bait do you need? Well, again, really depends how many fish you've got in front of you. If you think you're fishing a hard water where you're fishing for 1 or 2 bites, whatever you do, don't fill it in, because you're just cutting your chances down. Start off with just a couple of pints, 3 pints of ground bait really. Fish, and put 2 rods over it on a reasonable sized area and see what comes along. If you're fishing a water with a lot of bream in it, then they'll eat it pretty quickly, and so it's worth putting in more. But again, there's no need for gallons and gallons and gallons of bait. A couple of kilos of ground bait mixed up with half a bag of pellets is generally as much as I'll use, and that keeps the cost down as well. Otherwise it can spiral and get really expensive, and that's where all there is to it really. Again, the key really is fishing accurately, especially when the lakes are weedy, putting that bait out accurately using a spod and the marker, and using the marker to get everything laid on, and then clipping up and being fastidious really about your accuracy, and you won't go far wrong. Now, given the water was quite clear, even though it was weedy, I really wanted to try and get some underwater footage of the bream on this lake. And given the weed, I decided to rig the camera up a little bit different to normally. And that meant setting it up with a fish vertically, looking straight at the bottom, and fixed about 4 feet off the bottom so it was looking down and I could see what was going on. And when I cast it out, obviously I had no idea what I was going to get, but it was straight on the money. I clipped it up and you can see there was groundbait balls right in front of it straight away. And it only took about 14 minutes for the bream to start appearing. And very soon they were circling around the baited area. There was groundbait balls all over the place. And it took a while. They came in and were looking at the balls of groundbait, which was obviously broken down on the bottom, but weren't actually taking them. And this went on for about 20 minutes. But as you can see now, they've definitely hit one of the groundbait balls. And you can see all the particles coming off of it. Still looking at the one underneath the camera and haven't really taken that yet. And this behaviour went on for about half an hour. And all this time, this was about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had the odd bream rolling in the swim, which told me they were there. And that one's the first fish there, after about 40 minutes, has actually come in and took the groundbait and had a feed on it. And that was a bit of a trigger really, and they started to come in, move the groundbait around and start to actually demolish the groundbait, pile of groundbait that was sitting on the bottom. Mixture of fish, some of them were males like that one, some of them were females like that. And as time went by and the light level started to go down, more and more fish started coming into the swim. Still normally in 1s and 2s, and they weren't feeding hard, they were coming in, taking a little bit and then moving away. And you can see just sampling the bait, but every time it's getting spread out, you know, just by the fish picking it up and spitting it out, and then the action of the fish moving around. Now this one's quite interesting that it's hitting the line, but not actually spooking, still feeding around it. And unfortunately the clarity started to go. I was really glad that I'd set the camera up like I had, because it meant the particles and the silt were falling away from the camera lens, not covering it up. There wasn't any bits of weed that could get stuck on the camera, and so we got some nice footage even though the light was pretty bad. And you can see we're about an hour and a half in now, and now the fish are starting to feed a bit more confidently. Interestingly, like you saw with that one, they're not bothered about touching the line at all. It's not really spooking them, which was surprised me. I expect them to be a bit more spooked by it. And some of the fish are quite recognisable by this time. There's one, you know, a lot of bits of spawning damage and stuff on it. And you can start to see the same fish coming in time and time again. And if we compare these bream to, say, some of the tench that I filmed in my other videos, you can see how much faster they're moving around. They're coming in, not really stopping, picking up a mouthful or two of food, and then they're off. And I think that explains a lot of why you can get away with longer hook lengths with bream fishing. They're sucking from a bit further away and they're hanging on to the bait for a bit longer. So that hook length I'm using 7-8 inches is probably about right on these sort of rigs. You don't need the really sort of short 2-3 inch rigs that I'd use for bream fishing. And now they're getting really confident. Light's going, bait's been in there a fair while now, and also the water's collared up. Nice two-tone fish there, just gone through. There he is again, and she. And they're really starting to feed a bit more confident, coming in numbers. Big old beaten up male. And interesting, that was the first one that seemed to be coughing something back out, some white bits. There you go, there we got it again. And looking at that, it was actually bits of white shell from snails, water snails that were on the bottom. Now, interesting one. Now, talk about a line bite. How about that? And it's spitting out bits of shell. And there you go. It's touched the line. It's actually knocked the camera right out of the way and not spooked at all, really, that one. More bits of shell. Feeding really confidently, obviously picking up mouthfuls of food and then dropping it. No problem at all. Quite happy to be feeding like that. And there we go. As the light really starting to go now, the fish are feeding confidently. And managed to get some great footage there. Really, really pleased with that. Well, I've had a couple of really enjoyable nights out after the bream. Had a few fish each night, all doubles actually, as it turns out, up to just under 12 pound. Fantastic size of fish. And to be honest, it was a leisurely session. There's nothing in this lake that's going to be record breaking, so I've not had to fish too hard. And to be honest, I was getting a lot of line bites, so each night I've actually wound in the early hours of the morning to get a couple of hours kip. Those line bites, on a weedy water like this, there's not a lot you can do about it because the line's held up and you can't sink it and get it down below the fish, so it's one of those things. I'd rather avoid it. I don't think the fish like it. It can spook them, but when the weed's up, there's not a lot you can do about it. And so that's my bream fishing tactics, really. Dead simple, nothing extraordinary or out unusual particularly. It's all about accuracy, particularly when the lakes get weedy, finding those clear spots. You're not going to catch fish if the rig's buried in the weed. So practice that accuracy, get the bait in accurately, and then make sure you're 100% sure that the rigs are fishing properly. And that's really all there is to it. So I hope you've enjoyed this film. There'll be some more coming along soon, so please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again. Cheers for now.